On a vast and unforgiving frontier, a solitary rancher rescues two royal sisters struggling against the night. He protects them without knowing their lineage or the storm that follows them. When dawn breaks, their father arrives with an entourage of warriors stretching across the desert. And in a decision that shakes tradition and reshapes destiny, the chief steps forward and claims the humble rancher as one of his own. The night had teeth. Wind tore through the valley like a pack of wolves, dragging sheets of rain across the dying land. The lantern swinging from Illy Harlow's saddle flickered against the darkness, its flame fighting for breath as thunder rolled across the plains. He rode with his hat pulled low, coat soaked through, boots heavy with mud. Behind him, Hollow Creek whispered through the stones, swollen, angry, alive. It was the sound of a land that had given up on mercy. Illy's horse snorted and slowed near a crooked fence post, the last one standing from what used to be his herd's corral. He looked out at the emptiness, not a cow left, not a sign of life, just wet earth and ghosts of better days. He dismounted slow, dragging the shovel from his saddlebag. The storm hissed through the grass as he knelt by a fresh mound of dirt. A wooden plank stood crooked at its head. On it, carved rough by a trembling hand, 3 letters B. E.L., the name of his last cow. He set the shovel upright beside the grave, took off his hat, and bowed his head. "Guess it's just you and me now, Lord," he murmured, voice cracked and hollow. "You took the herd, took Mary, took the boy. I don't reckon there's much left worth tackin'." Lightning tore the sky open, white and cruel. For a heartbeat, it lit the land in perfect clarity, every ridge, every shadow, every scar of drought and fire that had made Hollow Creek a graveyard of men. Illy stared into that burning light like a man hoping for an answer, but when it faded, only the dark remained. He climbed back onto the saddle, tugging at the reins. The horse hesitated, sensing something in the air. The wind had changed colder now, sharper. A whisper of danger carried through the rain. Then he heard it, hoofbeats, faint at first, swallowed by the storm, then louder, fast, a desperate rhythm slicing through the downpour. Illy turned his head toward the open flats, hand instinctively brushing the rifle strapped across his back. "Who the hell rides in a storm like this?" he muttered. Through the rain, a flicker of light, a carriage lantern, swaying wild, one wheel dragging. The horses pulling it were foaming at the mouth, eyes wide with terror. Then the whole thing lurched sideways and snapped, spilling into the mud with a crash that echoed through the valley. Illy spurred his horse forward. The wind fought him every inch, rain slicing across his face like shards of glass. When he reached the wreck, lightning struck again, and that's when he saw them. 2 women sprawled in the mud beside the broken carriage. Their dresses torn, jeweled bangles glittering faint in the stormlight. One's hand clutched a golden pendant shaped like a sun, the other's hair tangled with pearls and blood. They didn't belong to this land. Their beauty was carved from another world, faces pale, features noble, clothes richer than anything seen west of the Pecos. Illy jumped down, his boots sinking deep in the muck. He lifted the first woman, her pulse weak, breath trembling. The other lay still but warm, alive maybe. He looked up into the rain, searching the horizon. No riders, no help. Just the black mouth of the storm swallowing everything. He hesitated only a moment, then hoisted the smaller woman into his arms. "All right," he muttered, half to himself, half to the thunder. "Ain't my fight. But I reckon leaving you here would haunt me worse than ghosts." He carried her to his horse, securing her gently across the saddle. Then he turned back for the second one, her silver earrings catching the lightning like tears from heaven. As he lifted her, the sky boomed again, this time closer, deeper, a warning. Somewhere far off, through the roar of rain, another sound rose, a distant cry, high and sharp. Not human, not animal, a war horn. Illy froze, eyes narrowing toward the ridge. The storm wasn't the only thing chasing them tonight. He slung the second woman over his shoulder and climbed into the saddle, heart pounding with a fear he hadn't felt since the fire that took his family. He turned his horse toward Hollow Creek, spurring it hard through the dark. The storm swallowed them whole, man, horse, and two royal strangers, disappearing into a night that would change everything before dawn. The thunder rolled again, not as sound, but as prophecy. The storm followed him like a living thing. Wind clawed at his back, rain bit his face, and thunder chased every hoof beat down the trail toward the ridge. Illy bent low, pressing the women against him, trying to shield them from the cold and the fury above. His horse stumbled once in the mud, but pushed forward, breath steaming, eyes wide with fear. "Come on, boy," Illy growled. Just a little further. The trail wound through the pines, their branches bending under the rain. Every gust sent dead needles swirling through the air like ashes. Lightning flashed again, splitting the night wide, and for a heartbeat, Illy saw the ridge behind him. Dark figures on horseback, moving fast. He grit his teeth. Damn it. He urged the horse faster, every muscle in his body burning as they cut through the dark. The creek ahead roared louder, swollen with rain, wild and angry, but his cabin stood beyond it, and that was all that mattered. The horse plunged through the current, water splashing up to Illy's knees. He kept his grip firm, holding the women close as the animal fought the flow. The world blurred, thunder, rain, breath, heartbeat, all one long, desperate sound. Then, finally, solid ground. Illy pushed forward through the brush until the dim outline of his cabin appeared, a crooked frame of logs crouched beneath the pines. Smoke long gone from its chimney. The lantern by the porch swayed in the wind like a dying star. He pulled the horse to a stop and swung down, boots sinking into the mud. "Hold on," he muttered to the women, though neither could hear him. He carried the first through the door, her skin cold, her lips pale as snow, and laid her on the cot by the wall. Then he went back for the second, her arm limp, jewelry clinking faint against his coat. When the door slammed shut behind him, the storm's howl softened to a distant moan. Only the crackle of his lantern filled the silence now. Illy crouched beside the women, his breath trembling in the dim light. He peeled the wet blankets from the bed and covered them both. One of them stirred the younger, maybe her fingers twitching against his hand. He froze, waiting. Her eyes fluttered, open, dark, clear, strange. Eyes that didn't belong to this land. They searched him, wary at first, then softening with something like gratitude. "You're safe," he said quietly, voice rough from years of silence. "You're safe now." She tried to speak, but only a faint whisper came. Her throat too dry, her lips cracked. Illy poured a little water from the jug beside the table and lifted her head carefully. She drank, slow, trembling. "Rest," he said, "you're hurt." But before she could answer, she went limp again, exhaustion dragging her back into darkness. Illy sat back, staring at them both. The firelight danced over their faces, soft features marked by bruises, fine clothes torn by the desert's cruelty. He'd seen ranch wives, barmaids, even preachers' daughters, but these two. They were different. He rose and poured whiskey over his shaking hands, watching the blood wash away. "What the hell have I brought home this time?" Outside, the storm still raged, beating against the walls like a warning. He crossed to the window, peering through the rain. The ridge was black now, no riders visible, but something in his gut twisted. He'd seen men hunted before, and whoever these women were, someone wanted them found. He turned back to the bed. One of them had turned in her sleep, her face toward him. Beneath the dirt, she was almost beautiful, not soft, but proud. A woman born to command. Around her neck, a chain of gold gleamed beneath the firelight, the kind only worn by nobility. Illy stared at it for a long while, his jaw tightening. He poured a drink, sat down by the hearth, and let the fire's heat sink into his bones. The shadows crept long across the floor, whispering through the cracks of the old wood. "Lord," he murmured, rubbing his temples, "if you're looking to test a man again, you've picked the wrong one." He took a long swallow of whiskey, eyes fixed on the flames. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in that cabin. Yet the silence felt heavier than ever. And outside, beyond the rain, beyond the creek, the faint echo of a war horn sounded once more, rolling through the night like the voice of fate. Illy didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there, jaw set, eyes hard, listening to the sound fade into the storm, a promise that before dawn Hollow Creek would know blood again. By dawn, the wind had spent itself. leaving only the soft hiss of rain dripping from the pines. The world outside was washed clean, but inside that small log cabin, the air still held the weight of sleepless hours. Illy Harlow sat by the dying fire, elbows on his knees, eyes hollow from the long night. The whiskey bottle beside him was nearly empty. A candle burned low beside it, its light trembling like it feared the silence. He hadn't closed his eyes once, couldn't. Every time the fire cracked, he'd turn to the bed, half expecting the women to vanish like the rest of his life had. They hadn't. They lay still, pale beneath the blankets, breathing shallow but steady. The younger one's hair, black as a raven's wing, had dried in soft waves over her shoulders. The elder's brow was marked by a faint cut, bandaged clumsily with Illy's old handkerchief. He'd patched wounds before on horses, cattle, himself, but never on something that looked this fragile. The fire popped. His hand flinched toward the rifle, leaning by the wall, instinct born from years of expecting bad news. But there was no danger, only ghosts. He rose slow, every joint creaking, and crossed to the window. The plains stretched gray beneath the morning mist. No riders, no tracks. The creek was swollen but calm now, winding like a silver scar through the valley. Quiet, he muttered, half to himself. Too damn quiet. He turned back, his eyes catching on the gold pendant lying against the elder woman's collarbone. Its surface glimmered faintly in the candlelight, etched with strange symbols. A crest he didn't recognize. He frowned. The thing looked heavy, expensive, the kind of trinket men killed for. He looked away, jaw tightening. Not my business. He said under his breath, ain't never been. But the words felt weak, hollow like lies whispered to the wind. He went to the hearth, added a log to the coals, and crouched there, staring into the flames. Their dance was hypnotic orange light flickering across the scars on his hands. His mind drifted, uninvited, to the night 5 years past. The fire in his barn, the screams, his wife's hands reaching for their son through the smoke, and Illy helpless, stumbling, too slow to save either. He'd buried them with his bare hands before the sun came up that day. Since then he hadn't prayed, hadn't hoped, hadn't cared for a soul that wasn't on 4 legs, until last night. He clenched his jaw, fighting the ache that rose in his chest. Don't you start again, he whispered. You help no one, you lose no one, that's the way it's gotta be. Then a sound, soft, weak, like the rustle of silk. He turned, the younger woman had stirred. Her fingers brushed the blanket aside, her eyes blinking open to the dim light. For a moment, she looked lost, like someone waking in a place between worlds. Then her gaze found him. Illy froze, caught by those eyes deep and dark, like polished stone after rain. Where are we? Her voice was hoarse, trembling with exhaustion. You're in my cabin, he said quietly. Found you on the trail last night. Carriage was wrecked. You were near dead. She tried to sit up but winced, clutching her side. Illy stepped closer, hesitated, then propped a pillow behind her. Easy, he murmured. You took a hard fall. The woman looked around, her eyes tracing the old wood walls, the single window, the rifle near the door. You live here alone. Illy nodded once. Ain't much of a life, but it's mine. Her gaze softened. You saved us. He looked away, didn't do it for thanks. A silence stretched heavy, awkward, but not unkind. The fire crackled, filling the space between them. My name is Selene, she said finally, her accent faint, foreign. And my sister, Mara, is she? She's alive. Illy interrupted, glancing at the bed. Still out cold, but breathin'. You both got lucky. Selene followed his eyes, relief washing over her features. You have our deepest debt, Mr. Harlow, he said after a pause. Illy Harlow. She nodded slowly. Mr. Harlow, you risked yourself for strangers. That's not something most men would do. He stared into the fire again. Most men don't got much left to lose. Her eyes studied him for a long moment, the lines on his face, the rough hands, the sadness that never quite left his eyes. She seemed to understand more than words aloud. Finally, she whispered, We won't forget this kindness. Illy didn't answer. He poured himself another drink and let the silence settle deep. Outside, the sun tried to break through the clouds, but the light came weak and pale. Inside, the shadows clung stubborn to the corners like the ghosts that never left. And somewhere far beyond the creek, faint but unmistakable, a single echo of hooves drifted through the morning mist. By the time the lantern's flame swayed low, the night had softened, and yet, beneath that hush, something old stirred. The rancher's rough hands poured warm broth into a tin cup, offering it to the older sister first. She took it gently. Her eyes, bright as autumn amber, watched him like she'd known him from a dream. "You saved us," she whispered, her accent royal, yet trembling, "but you don't know what you've done." The rancher tilted his hat back. "Just helped two souls in need. Ain't much more to it." The younger sister laughed quietly, a laugh hiding thunder. "You think the desert forgives kindness so easily?" He didn't answer. He just looked out toward the open range, black, endless, whispering with wind. The coyotes had gone silent. That was never good. Then, from far off, came a sound, not hoofbeats, not wagons, but drums, slow, steady, echoing across the basin. The sisters froze. Their eyes met, and the elder one said softly, "They've found us." The rancher's jaw tightened. "Who?" But she didn't answer. She only reached into her satchel and drew out a crest made of pure gold, shaped like a lion's heart, crowned with arrows. Moonlight flashed across it, the royal seal of a kingdom no man in the West had ever seen. And before he could speak again, the younger sister blew out the lantern. Darkness swallowed the cabin whole, and outside, through the silence, came the distant cry of a war horn, one that had not been heard on this land for 100 years. Before dawn, the desert was breathing smoke. The rancher woke to a sound that didn't belong to the earth, iron striking rhythm, hooves rolling like thunder over stone. He rose slow, his rifle in hand, eyes narrowed toward the horizon. Through the pale mist, a long shadow moved, not a man, not a herd, but a formation, warriors, cloaked and silent, spreading across the dunes like ghosts made of moonlight and dust. The two sisters stood behind him, veils drawn once more. But this time, fear no longer held their faces, only resolve. "They are our father's men," the elder whispered, "sent to bring us home." The rancher's grip tightened. "Then why hide from him?" The younger one stepped closer, her voice low. "Because home ain't what it used to be. Our father," she hesitated, "our father believes we are dead." A crack of thunder rolled across the valley, not from the sky, but from rifles. Dust jumped at his boots. The rancher shoved the sisters toward the wagon. "No more talk. Move." They ran for the stables, skirts whipping through the wind, horses shrieking at the scent of danger. The rancher swung into his saddle, eyes sharp as steel. Behind them, the ridge came alive, torches flaring, banners rising, warriors on black stallions roaring across the plain. And as the first arrow split the dawn sky, the rancher kicked his horse hard and shouted, "Hold tight. We ride through fire before breakfast." The wind howled back with laughter and death as the chase began. The rancher's horse tore across the sand like it knew the world was ending. Arrows hissed past his ears, cutting through the wind with the sound of angry serpents. Behind him, the royal sisters clung to the wagon seat, their veils snapping like battle flags. The morning sun climbed slow, bleeding gold over the ridges, and every ray seemed to set the horizon aflame. The rancher looked back once. The riders were closer now, 30, maybe 40 of them, faces masked, spears glinting with symbols he didn't understand. They rode in silence, save for the pounding of hooves that echoed like drums of war. "Where's this trail lead?" he shouted. The elder sister pointed toward the west, through the canyons, past the river of stones no man dares cross it. The rancher spat dust and grit. "Then that's where we're going." They thundered into the canyon, its red walls rising high and narrow, shadows twisting like ghosts watching from above. The air was thick, hot, heavy with echoes. A single arrow grazed his sleeve, another shattered the wagon wheel. The younger sister screamed as the cart tilted hard. The rancher leapt from his saddle, grabbed the reins, and yanked the horses back before the wagon could roll. The canyon walls roared with the sound of collapse. Rocks tumbled, dust filled the air, and for a moment silence. Then, nothing but the echo of hoofbeats fading beyond the ridge. The rancher slumped to his knees, coughing through the dust. The sisters looked down at him, their royal eyes gleaming with gratitude and something else. The elder spoke softly, almost like a prayer. "You have no idea who you just defied, cowboy." He looked up, smiling through the blood on his lip. "Don't need to know, long as they bleed red same as me." The sisters exchanged a look that carried both sorrow and awe. Because, somewhere beyond the horizon, a king had just learned his daughters lived, and the man who saved them was now the most wanted soul on both sides of the desert. By nightfall, the sky had turned copper, burning low behind the far mesas like an angry god watching from the edge of the world. The rancher stood by the dying fire, patching the wagon wheel with his last strip of leather. His knuckles were scraped raw, his shirt torn, but his eyes never left the horizon. The sisters sat nearby, whispering in a tongue older than the desert wind. The younger one traced a symbol in the sand, the same lion, heart crest he'd seen before. He finally spoke, voice dry as grit. "Your father. What kind of man sends an army after his own blood?" The elder's gaze drifted toward the mountains. "A king who's forgotten mercy. A ruler who trades daughters for peace." The rancher froze. "Peace with who?" Before she could answer, a faraway horn moaned across the night, low, ancient, sorrowful. The horses whinnied, restless. The younger sister rose, cloak fluttering like wings in the dim light. "He's sent the royal hunters. They track by scent, not sight. They won't stop until your land drinks our blood." The rancher tightened his belt, loaded his rifle slow, and said nothing. His face was carved from shadow and firelight. Then he stepped closer to them, his voice calm but cold. "Then we best make sure the land stays thirsty." The elder sister looked at him, really looked, and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Not fear, not greed, but a man too stubborn to run and too proud to kneel. And somewhere far beyond the hills, in a marble palace across the sea of sand, a crown glimmered beneath torchlight. The king had just signed the decree. For the first time in centuries, royal hunters were free to kill beyond their borders. And their quarry was a rancher and 2 royal daughters who refused to die quietly. The wind carried the scent of rain and steel. The rancher led the sisters through a dry creek bed, their footsteps muffled in the moon's pale glow. Every sound was sharper now, the whisper of boots, the creak of leather, the faraway cry of a hawk circling under the stars. They moved in silence until the younger sister broke it. "Why do you help us? You owe us nothing." The rancher didn't look back. "'Cause once someone helped me, didn't ask why then either." The trail curved toward a cluster of dead pines. He motioned them low, crouching behind the brush. From up the ridge came the shimmer of torches, slow and steady. Riders. He counted them in the dark, 6, maybe 7. Their armor caught the moonlight like glass. Each carried a curved blade on the hip, and on their cloaks the lion crest drawn in blood. The sisters tensed. The elder one whispered, "Those are my father's shadow guard. They serve no law." The rancher chambered around, whispering to himself, "Good, I don't either." The first arrow struck the dirt near his boot, silent, clean. Then another. He fired once, twice. Sparks danced through the canyon. Horses screamed. Men shouted. The sisters ran for cover as the world burst into flame and dust. When the smoke cleared, only one guard still breathed. The rancher dragged him by the collar, knife to his throat. "Tell your king." He hissed, "If he wants his daughters, he'll have to ride through hell to get 'em." The guard's eyes widened, then fell still. The sisters watched, trembling not from fear, but from what they now knew. The man who had saved them had just declared war on a kingdom, and as the moon sank low behind the mountains, its light caught the rifle in his hand, glinting silver like a promise made in blood. The desert knows no kings. At dawn broke slow over the canyons, turning the sand to fire and the sky to gold. The rancher sat alone at the edge of a dry well, wiping soot from his hands. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, calm, steady, unshaken the way a man looks when he's already made peace with death. The sisters were quiet beside the wagon. The younger one tended to the horses, whispering in her own tongue, the kind that sounded like a hymn to the wind. The elder stitched a tear in her cloak, her royal rings hidden under a veil of dust. At last she spoke. "They will come again. You've killed the king's hunters, he'll send legions next." The rancher poured the last of the coffee into a tin cup, took a sip, and said flatly, "Then we'll just keep killin' till there ain't any left to send." The elder sister stared at him half in disbelief, half in wonder. "You talk as if the desert belongs to you." He smiled faintly, gaze drifting toward the red dunes. "Ain't mine, ain't his either. The desert don't bow to crowns or guns. It buries both the same." A long silence followed, broken only by the wind. The younger sister looked up. "Where will we go now?" The rancher rose, tightening his hat, dust settling on his shoulders like armor. "There's a place north of here, a dry fort from the old wars. Nobody's claimed it since the soldiers vanished. We'll hole up there till the storm passes." The elder hesitated, and if it doesn't pass, he paused, eyes like stone under the brim of his hat. "Then we make our own peace beneath it." The wind howled through the cliffs as if the desert itself approved. And somewhere far to the east, inside a golden throne room, a messenger knelt before the king holding a blood-stained crest that once belonged to his guard. The king rose slowly, voice shaking with fury. "Find the man they call the rancher. I want his heart brought back in a silver box." By nightfall, they reached it, a broken fort carved into the cliffs, half buried by sand and time. The walls leaned like tired giants, and the gates hung open, rusted and moaning in the desert wind. The rancher led the horses inside, scanning every shadow. "Used to be Union stockade," he muttered. "Back when men still thought they could tame this land." The elder sister stepped through the ruins, her eyes catching the faint glow of the setting sun through the cracks. "And now?" she asked. He looked around at the bones of the place, splintered beams, bullet holes, the ghosts of soldiers who died fighting the dust. "Now it's just what's left after pride runs dry." They set camp inside the courtyard. The younger sister lit a lantern, and the flame danced over the walls, painting faces that weren't there anymore. The rancher laid his rifle beside him, sat down slow, and listened. Silence. Too much silence. He stood again, motioned them to stay low, and moved toward the outer gate. The sand shifted strangely there, heavy, deliberate. He crouched, brushed his hand across the dirt, and found tracks, boot prints. Fresh, before he could call out, an arrow split the darkness, embedding into the doorframe an inch from his head. The sisters screamed. He fired back 1, 2, 3 rounds. Shadows moved on the ridge, figures in cloaks, glinting steel under the stars. They had found the fort. The rancher grabbed the elder sister's arm. "Down below, there's an old bunker." They ran through the hall of ruins, dust choking their lungs, the sound of war echoing in their wake. From behind, the younger sister turned once, her face pale, eyes wide. She saw the crest again, stamped on every cloak of their attackers, the lion crowned with arrows. Her voice broke through the roar of gunfire. "They've sent the royal executioners." The rancher slammed the bunker door shut as arrows rained like thunder. Then he turned to the sisters, jaw set, eyes burning in the lantern light. "Then it's their funeral, not mine." The lantern flickered once, and went out. The night bled into dawn, but the world felt hollow, like the sun itself was too afraid to rise. Smoke drifted from the ruined fort, curling in slow ghosts toward the gray horizon. Illy Harlow moved first, rifle slung across his back, dust streaking his coat. The sisters followed close, their dresses torn, eyes raw from smoke and fear. Every step through that canyon tasted like ashes. The wind carried silence until it didn't. A single raven cried, and the sound tore through the valley like a curse. They were being followed. He could feel it. Tracks behind them, pressed deep in the sand. The executioners hadn't died last night. They had only circled around, patient as wolves. Illy stopped near a dry creek bed, knelt down, and pressed 2 fingers into the dust. The print was fresh, a horse, light and fast. Another followed, 3 riders, maybe 4, keep close. He whispered, His voice was calm, but his eyes said otherwise. The younger sister, Selene, clutched her cloak tight. "We can't keep running forever." Illy didn't look back. "Ain't planning to." They moved along the canyon ridge, their silhouettes cutting sharp against the rising light. The air grew heavier, charged, that kind of stillness that happens right before blood spills. Far ahead, vultures circled, not over the living, over a trail. The sisters saw at first a streak of dark crimson staining the sand, drops scattered like a map left by death itself. Illy followed the trail up a small rise, where a single horse lay collapsed, one of the attackers, throat cut clean. He crouched beside the corpse, pulled a small black dagger from the man's hand. The blade was carved with tribal runes, cruel ones. He looked at Mara, the elder sister. "This is your father's mark." She hesitated, then nodded. "My father's men, they're not far behind, or what's left of them," Illy replied, scanning the ridge. A shot rang out. The echo cracked across the canyon like a whip. Illy dove, rolling behind a rock, dragging Selene down with him. Dust exploded where they'd just stood. Up high, he shouted, "They're hurting us." Bullets screamed off the stone, the air burning with gunpowder. The sisters huddled low, trembling. Illy fired back once, twice, each shot measured, patient, merciless. Then the silence returned thicker than before. He waited. The wind answered first, blowing a faint whistle through the canyon walls. Then came the sound he'd been fearing, hooves. Close, too close. He turned toward the sisters. "We follow the blood trail. It leads to whoever made it. Might be your people, might not. But either way, it's the only way out of this valley." Mara drew her cloak tighter, the insignia still hidden beneath. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "Then lead us, Illy. Before the sun rises too high, or before it never rises again." He nodded once, and together they moved into the mist, the sound of death behind them, and the promise of something worse ahead. The sun burned through the canyon walls, turning stone to copper and shadow to smoke. Illy Harlow led the sisters along the narrow trail, rifle ready, eyes scanning every ridge. Dust clung to their boots, their clothes, their skin a fine red film that marked them as fugitives from the world. The canyon was alive now. Every echo carried a warning, the cries of unseen birds, the skitter of lizards across rocks, the soft scrape of boots against stone, and beneath it all, the relentless heartbeat of hooves. The executioners had returned. Suddenly a figure appeared on a ridge, black cloak flapping, spear raised. Illy fired. The figure tumbled, disappearing over the edge, a scream swallowed by the canyon. "Keep moving," he barked, voice low but firm. They turned a bend, and the world erupted. 3 riders burst from behind the rocks, blades flashing in the morning light. The sisters screamed. Illy dove between them and the younger one, pulling her behind a boulder. Steel rang on steel, bullets whizzed past. Illy fired, ducked, rolled, each movement precise. A man who had faced death too many times to fear it now. Mara's hands shook until they didn't. In the chaos, she drew a dagger from her sash, silver glinting. The first attacker lunged. She met him with a swift strike, steel biting flesh. Another fell before she could gasp. Her royal rings were streaked with blood, the crest she bore hidden beneath the dust of battle. Illy's eyes flicked to the horizon. A banner rose, crimson, gold, and black. The king's army, too far to help, yet impossibly close. He glanced back at the sisters. "Hold tight. Don't stop. Not now." The younger sister, Selene, gritted her teeth and ran, following Illy's lead. Mara fought behind, every swing precise, her hands no longer trembling. The canyon became a river of fire and blood, the walls echoing with screams and gunfire, the dust painting the air in streaks of orange and red. One final rider charged from the side. Illy spun, fired, and the man fell, rolling down the slope into silence. Breathing heavy, Illy turned to the sisters, their faces streaked with dust and blood, eyes wide with terror and awe. "Not done yet," he said, voice rough, low, "but we've made it this far. That's more than most get." The wind carried a distant roar, the first sounds of the king's approaching army. Illy knew it was only a matter of time before the canyon became a crucible. And in that crucible, every choice, every act of courage, every drop of blood would be tested. But for now, they had survived. and survival in this desert was the first victory. The desert faded behind them, replaced by the vast circle of the royal camp, a world of torches and tents stretching as far as the eye could see. Smoke curled upward from fires that smelled of pine and sacrifice, and drums beat low and steady, echoing across the plain. Illy Harlow rode slowly into the camp, his eyes scanning every shadow. The sisters flanked him, their shoulders squared, their royal cloaks tattered but proud. The guards parted with murmured respect and suspicion, their eyes wary of the stranger who had dared defy the king's command. The air was thick with the scent of incense, leather, and war. Children scuttled among the tents, oblivious to the tension, while warriors polished their spears and swords in silence. Each step forward felt like crossing into another world, one of power, legacy, and judgment. At the center, a tent larger than any Illy had ever seen rose above the rest. Its flaps swayed in the evening wind, revealing gold, threaded banners and symbols of a kingdom older than the desert itself. The sisters fell to one knee before it. Illy followed awkwardly, the weight of his own solitude pressing down like a storm, and then he saw him King Acheron. The man's armor glimmered under torchlight, every plate etched with the marks of battle and kingship. His eyes, dark and piercing, studied Illy with a predator's patience. Pride and suspicion warred in the gaze, but there was also curiosity, the kind that weighed men like scales. The camp held its breath. No one spoke. Warriors shifted uneasily on their heels, horses snorted, flames leapt higher. The sisters whispered quickly, explaining in hurried tones what had transpired. Illy remained silent, letting the truth carry itself in his actions and the scars that lined his hands and face. The king finally spoke, voice deep, resonant, carrying across the open circle. "You will stay until dawn," he said, each word deliberate. "Then we decide if you live." Illy nodded slowly, the words heavy like stones in his gut. He glanced at the sisters, their eyes, wide and hopeful, mirrored the same question he carried silently. Could a man broken by loss, by desert, by blood, ever find trust among kings? The drums continued to beat, a slow pulse under the stars as night wrapped the camp in shadow and uncertainty. Illy settled against a tent post, rifle across his knees, firelight reflecting in his eyes. Somewhere deep in the desert, the wind whispered truths only he could hear, that honor was never simple, that courage was never quiet, and that the shadow of a king could fall heavier than any storm he had ever faced. And under that shadow, the rancher waiting to see if survival alone would be enough to earn the trust of men who ruled not by mercy, but by legacy. Night deepened, casting long shadows across the camp. Torches flickered like restless spirits, and the drums rolled on, slow and relentless, as if counting down the moments of destiny. Illy sat near the fire, arms resting on his knees, eyes locked on Mara and Selene. Their faces, illuminated by the glow, were a mixture of fear and hope, trust and uncertainty. Every breath he took seemed to echo in the silence around him. The king emerged from his tent at last, ceremonial armor gleaming, a presence that made the camp itself seem smaller. He walked toward Illy, his steps deliberate, the ground vibrating slightly beneath the weight of authority. Warriors parted instinctively, leaving only the three of them in the firelight. "You've crossed deserts, defied my hunters, and brought my daughters to me alive," the king said, voice low but carrying the weight of a gavel. "Yet you are a stranger. Who are you, man of dust and blood, that dares challenge a kingdom?" Illy's throat tightened. He met the king's gaze without flinching. "Just a man who don't leave others to die. Ain't noble, ain't brave, just alive and standing where I am." A silence fell, thicker than night itself. The king studied him, eyes searching for lies, weakness, or fear. Illy felt the scrutiny like fire on his skin. Then Mara stepped forward, her voice steady but trembling. "Father, he saved us. He gave his life to keep ours. He is honest." Selene echoed softly, "He is the only reason we live to stand here." The king's gaze softened slightly, but the edge remained. He motioned for Illy to kneel. Illy's hands stayed on his rifle, but his knees bent. the gesture a mix of respect and caution. "You will stay until dawn." The king said again, softer this time, "Your fate will be decided by the council, not by me alone. But know this, your actions are weighed, and the measure of your honor will be revealed." Ili lowered his eyes. The firelight danced across the king's armor, across the medallions of warriors standing silent, their weapons gleaming. He could hear the wind whisper through the tents, carrying the promise of judgment, of trial, of fate. He glanced at Mara and Selene. Their trust, fragile and steadfast, was a quiet flame in the storm of uncertainty. And for the first time in years, Ili felt the weight of being judged not for what he had lost, but for what he had given. The night stretched on, the drums fading, leaving only the crackle of fire and the rustle of banners in the wind. Ili settled against a tent post, eyes on the stars above, knowing that when dawn came, the trial of honor would begin, and with it, the chance to prove that even a man of dust could rise to stand among kings. The first light of dawn seeped through the horizon, painting the camp in gold and bronze. Smoke from countless fires coiled upward, merging with the morning mist like spirits rising from the desert. Ili Harlow awoke to the scent of cedar, sweat, and tension thick enough to choke. Council had gathered. Warriors circled the central clearing, shields polished, spears upright, eyes sharp as hawk talons. Ili could feel their gazes slicing through him, measuring the weight of every scar, every wrinkle, every hesitation. The sisters stood behind him, silent but steady, their shadows stretching long across the sand. A horn sounded low, ceremonial, echoing across the plain. It was time. King Acheron stepped forward, armor glinting in the morning sun, eyes fixed on Ili with the gravity of judgment itself. "You stand accused," the king intoned, "of traveling unchaperoned with my daughters, of defying the order of the crown. Your honor must be proven before the council, before your fate is sealed." Ili swallowed dust, grit in his throat. He didn't speak. He only nodded, knowing words would not carry him through this. Only action could. A path was cleared. At its center, a sacred totem burned, a symbol of truth, of courage, of the trials of those who walk in honor. The flames licked high, casting tongues of gold and crimson across the faces of the watchers. Smoke spiraled upward, thick and bitter, carrying the weight of centuries. The council murmured as Ili stepped forward, boots crunching against the sand, heart hammering with every step. He could see the sisters, their eyes wide, hands clenched in silent prayer. And he could feel the sun's heat, the fire's heat, the heat of judgment pressing down on him from every angle. He crouched briefly, examining the totem. It was more than wood, it was a rite of passage, a test of courage, a bridge between survival and honor. He took a deep breath, arms trembling, then plunged forward, gripping the burning totem with hands scorched by fire, refusing to falter. Flames seared his skin, blackened smoke stung his eyes, yet he pressed on. Every step, every movement was a defiance of fear itself. Around him, the council watched, unmoving, their faces masks of judgment, waiting to see if a man of dust and solitude could rise above the fire. And Ili rose step by step, hand over hand, standing amidst the burning symbols, sweat and soot and blood mingling, yet unbroken, unbowed, unafraid. The camp fell silent, even the wind held its breath. He had crossed the first threshold. And in that silence, the echoes of truth whispered that courage is measured not by the battles one avoids, but by the fire one chooses to walk through. Ili Harlow stood amidst the sacred flames, smoke curling around him like a living shroud. His hands burned, his face streaked with ash and sweat, but he did not falter. Every eye in the council was fixed upon him, silent, measuring, waiting for weakness. Mara and Selene clutched each other's hands, hearts pounding. They could see every muscle in his arms tremble from the pain, every breath drawn like a battle with the fire itself. Yet he stood tall, unflinching, unyielding. The king stepped closer, the morning light glinting off his armor, eyes narrowed with scrutiny. "Step from the fire," he commanded. "If you survive, you will have proven your honor. If not..." His gaze lingered, unspoken but deadly. Illy didn't step back. Instead, he lifted the totem higher, letting the flames lick the edges, the heat searing through his shirt, through his sleeves, into his flesh. The council stirred. A few gasped. Others remained statues of judgment. But the sisters watched with wide eyes, hope flickering like fragile candlelight. He set the totem down at last, unscathed in spirit, if not in body, and straightened. Charred, bleeding, yet standing. Every breath he drew was a triumph, every movement a testament. The king's lips pressed into a thin line, silence stretched like a desert plain. Then, slowly, deliberately, he nodded. A warrior stepped forward, carrying a basin of water. Illy dipped his hands, washing away soot and blood, revealing the calluses, the scars, the proof of a man forged in struggle, not inherited in title. Mara exhaled, a single tear running down her cheek. Selene clutched Illy's arm, whispering his name, gratitude and awe intertwined. The king raised his hand. The council has witnessed the truth. A man's honor is not given by blood or birth, but by the fire he walks through. This man, he gestured toward Illy, has walked it. Whispers rippled through the camp. Warriors lowered their weapons. The fire died down slowly, leaving the clearing awash in the gold light of morning, the smell of smoke still heavy in the air. Illy sank to one knee, exhausted, hands trembling. The sisters approached, their presence steady and grounding, and together they looked at the king. "You have proven yourself," the king said. "Your actions speak louder than words, louder than law, louder than fear. You are not just alive. You are honorable." Illy exhaled slowly, the weight of judgment lifting, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. The desert wind whispered through the camp, carrying the smell of smoke, sand, and redemption. For the first time, Illy felt it. That courage, once tested, could forge a place even a man like him could call home. The midday sun stretched high over the royal camp, burning away the morning haze and revealing the banners of the kingdom in brilliant gold and crimson. Warriors moved with purpose, the clatter of boots and armor mixing with the quiet murmur of conversation. Illy Harlow walked among them now, no longer a stranger, yet not fully claimed by the court he had earned the right to stand in. The sisters flanked him, proud and composed. Mara's eyes scanned the camp with quiet authority. Selene's hands were steady, though her gaze softened whenever it lingered on Illy. He noticed the subtle shifts in the camp: warriors nodding respectfully, children peeking curiously, elders whispering among themselves. His presence no longer stirred fear or suspicion. It had transformed into something heavier, something earned. King Acheron approached, ceremonial medallion in hand. The gold caught the sun, reflecting across the courtyard in fractured beams, like justice made visible. Illy felt the weight of every eye upon him, the stillness before the moment when judgment transforms into acknowledgement. "Illy Harlow," the king said, voice firm but carrying a note of reverence. "You have survived fire, blood, and trial. You have proven your loyalty, your honor, and your courage. From this day forward—" He paused, lifting the medallion. "You are recognized not only as a friend of my daughters, but as one of my own." The camp seemed to exhale, the tension of weeks, days, and nights dissolving in that single declaration. Warriors bowed, some placing hands to hearts, others kneeling in respect. Illy felt the weight of the medallion as it was placed over his neck, heavy, solid, a bond he had never expected, a recognition that went beyond words. Mara stepped forward, eyes glistening with tears, and whispered, "Father, he saved us. He saved all of us." Selene nodded, clutching her sister's hand. "He is one of us, truly." Illy met their eyes, the sun casting long shadows across his weathered face. For the first time in years, he felt something he thought he had lost: belonging. The kind of belonging that doesn't ask for explanations, that doesn't demand perfection, that simply accepts a man for what he has endured and what he has given. Above, the banners fluttered in the wind, proud and unwavering. The camp moved around him, alive with the quiet murmur of reconciliation and the soft laughter of children who had not known fear in weeks. Illy breathed deeply, the scent of smoke, sand, and polished leather filling his lungs. The weight of past losses pressed down, but it was tempered by this moment the recognition of his place, of his honor, of the bond he had forged not by birth, but by fire and blood. The camp hummed with life under the bright midday sun, yet Illy Harlow stood in a quiet bubble of acknowledgment, the medallion heavy against his chest, a symbol of trust and kinship he had never imagined for himself. Warriors passed by with subtle nods, children peered curiously, and even the elders offered faint, approving smiles. Every movement around him felt like a ripple confirming the solidity of his place in this new world. Mara and Selene approached, their steps deliberate, their expressions radiant with gratitude and relief. Mara reached out, resting a hand on Illy's arm. "You've given us more than our lives," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tears shimmering in her eyes. "You've given us hope." Selene, quieter but equally intense, pressed her palm against his shoulder. "You are no longer a stranger to us, Illy. Not in heart, not in blood, not in honor." The king observed from a distance, his expression unreadable at first, then softening. He gestured toward the sisters, and they bowed respectfully to him. In that moment, the bond of family stretched beyond tradition, beyond titles, and into the unspoken realm of loyalty and sacrifice. Illy let the realization wash over him the long years of solitude, the nights spent whispering to the wind, the endless dust and despair of the frontier all had led him to this place. A place where a man was measured not by lineage, but by the courage to act when everything else was lost. The camp settled into a rhythm once more. Horses neighed, warriors sharpened blades, and the scent of roasting meat mingled with sun, warmed leather. Illy walked among them, no longer just a man who survived, but a man accepted, recognized, and honored. Mara and Selene flanked him as they moved through the camp, whispering softly, laughing lightly at something only they understood. Illy allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. The ache of past grief was still there, buried deep, but it no longer defined him. He was not just a survivor of the desert, the storm, and the fire. He was part of something larger, a circle of honor that would hold him no matter what storms remained beyond the camp's walls. Above them, banners fluttered in the wind, casting shadows that danced across the courtyard. Shadows that now included Illy's figure, solid, grounded, and unyielding. For the first time, he felt the warmth of belonging, the quiet pride of a man no longer defined by loss, but by the loyalty, courage, and blood he had freely given. And in that light, under the gaze of a kingdom, Illy Harlow understood some men are found not in the lands they own, but in the hearts they save and the lives they touch. The warm twilight settled over the prairie, spilling amber light across the tall grass, rustling gently in the soft evening breeze. Illy Harlow walked slowly back toward his ranch, each step deliberate, feeling the weight of the medallion still around his neck. It felt less like a burden and more like a tether to a world he had almost forgotten existed, a world where honor, trust, and family still mattered. The horses followed lazily behind, hooves sinking into the soft earth, kicking up small clouds of dust that glimmered in the dying light. The sisters rode beside him, Mara with a quiet, protective presence, Selene with a light in her eyes that mirrored the fading sun. They had chosen to leave the royal camp for now, but their visits, gifts, and the unspoken bond promised that the frontier would never be lonely again. Illy reached the porch of his cabin, leaning heavily against the weathered wood. The door creaked in the wind as he pushed it open, stepping into the familiar scent of cedar, leather, and years spent in solitude. His eyes swept over the empty room, but it no longer felt hollow. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the echo of laughter, gratitude, and life lingered, reminders that he had earned a place not just in the camp, but in hearts willing to remember him. He stepped outside again, watching the prairie stretch endlessly toward the setting sun. The golden light bathed everything in warmth, the fences, the distant hills, the soft swaying of the grass, and for a moment, He allowed himself to breathe without the weight of storms, gunfire, or judgment pressing down. A soft breeze brought the faint scent of the sister's presence, and Illy closed his eyes, remembering the king's words, "A man is not made by his blood, but by the fire he walks through." He smiled faintly, a quiet, knowing smile. The desert, the battles, the trials, they had all led him here. And now he was a cowboy no longer lost, but found. The prairie was silent save for the wind, the chirp of a distant bird returning to its nest, the soft rustle of grass against his boots. And Illy Harlow, once a man marked by solitude and grief, stood amidst it all calm, at peace, and one of his own. Night settled fully over the prairie, stars glimmering faintly in the dark velvet sky, casting silver light across the swaying grass. Illy Harlow stood on the porch of his cabin, hands resting on the rail, eyes tracing the horizon where the sun had vanished hours ago. The air smelled of earth, cedar, and distant fire, a reminder that life, in all its chaos and beauty, still moved forward. The sisters had returned for a brief visit earlier, leaving small gifts of grain, a few head of cattle, and words of gratitude that lingered in his mind like music. The medallion around his neck caught the moonlight, glinting softly, a constant reminder that courage and loyalty could forge ties stronger than blood. Illy closed his eyes, feeling the gentle prairie wind against his face. The loneliness that had defined him for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet contentment, a knowledge that he mattered, that he had made a difference, that he was part of something larger than himself. Memories of the desert, the storms, the battles, and the fire came and went like fleeting shadows, but they no longer carried the sting of loss. They were marks of survival, proof of honor, and badges of a life lived with courage and integrity. He breathed deeply, letting the cool night air fill his lungs, and felt something he hadn't felt in decades: peace. The world around him, the grass, the wind, the distant hoot of an owl, was alive and welcoming. He was no longer a man defined by sorrow or solitude. He was found. From the darkness, a coyote's cry echoed, fading into the night, a soft reminder that life on the frontier was never still, never quiet. Yet for Illy it was no longer threatening. It was part of the rhythm, the pulse of a world that had finally embraced him. He looked once more to the horizon, recalling the king's final words spoken in the glow of dawn and fire. "A man is not made by his blood, but by the fire he walks through." Illy let the words settle in his chest, a warmth spreading through him. The fire had passed, he had endured. The desert, the storms, the battles, they were behind him now, and ahead stretched endless possibility, companionship, and purpose. He stepped back from the railing, the prairie wind lifting his coat, and smiled faintly, quietly, the smile of a man who had been lost and finally found his place in the world. The stars blinked above, steady and eternal, and the prairie whispered its approval. Illy Harlow was home.